It is about 8:32 and February the 14th. Welcome to a special edition of the Drugs and Crimes. I'm Richard Wright. I'll be your professor for the next roughly 6 weeks. And tonight I'm going to spend some time just going over the requirements that I will be expecting you to complete during the course of the next 6 week assignments. And course quarter goes very, very, very fast, so don't want you to fall behind. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. No. Okay. Let me move this. Let's see. I move it this way. There we go. Okay. So as you can see, this is my picture that you guys have already seen, and I include here my phone number, and then I include a statement that means exactly what it says, and I tell students pay close attention to it. It says students can feel free to call me, text me, or email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. Now, it means exactly what it says, so you figure that one out. But I will say this, that when you do text me, please include your name, the course that you're in, because I won't recognize your number. And I respond very quickly to text messages and voicemails as well. You can leave me a voicemail. It doesn't matter how late it is. I'm up quite frequently pretty late. And then sometimes I get up through the night and I check my phones. And some of you are working at night, so I'm able to communicate with you. So you could do it anytime. I'm a pastor of a church on Sundays. You can still call. If I'm not available, you can leave a message and I'll get back in touch with you. Probably that same day. I won't wait until the next day. I usually like to respond very quickly when I get texts or phone calls from students. If you have an issue, probably the best way is not to email me, but to text me or call me and let me know about that information. And then I'll point out here that rubrics, notice rubrics are highlighted. In this course, rubrics are extremely important for getting good grades. Make sure you follow the rubrics for the written assignments. And the entire rubric is how I grade. APA, you're going to be required to have citations in the body, references at the end. Roman 12, you're going to have a cover page properly formatted, as well as a properly formatted reference page. And there are a few other things, but we have enough resources that I will be sharing with you relating to APA. I am very serious about it. You'll see it all over the place in the rubrics. You'll see it on the course home page as well. Critical thinking, very important. Critical thinking, I'll talk about a little bit in a few minutes. That's one of the 6 transferable skills that we at this college stress to students to understand and learn, because employers have told us these are the kind of candidates they look for employment. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. All these are very important in grading. In addition, I remind you here that you have to conduct research for all papers. That means the sole source of your papers cannot and should not be the textbook. Now, I will be providing you PowerPoints, tonight for this first week. I believe it's chapters 1 and 2, and each week after that. I won't use those PowerPoints during the lectures, but they're to help you to study the materials that are in the module for that week. But when you do your papers, if you use the textbook as the only source, you're going to lose points because that means that you haven't conducted any research. And so it is very, 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 very important that you do conduct research. And then I've already talked about APA, and I've talked about the cover sheets. These are some helpful resources that you can click on that will help you to be successful in this course. You're also going to find in every module there's a guide to help you that was designed for this course to help you. Tutoring, if you run into a problem, you're going to, I suggest you reach out to a tutor. If I see you're having a problem, I will refer you to a tutor for some assistance. Also, you should be aware that tutors are not just for students who are having trouble, not having trouble, but they can help you because the students that we have for student tutors are individuals who either have taken the course, they won't do the assignments for you, but what they'll do is they'll be able to give you some guidance and help and assistance in putting the assignments together. They're very well trained as well in their areas that they work in, including APA. Then there's some articles that will help you going beyond the textbook. This has to do with, like I said, researching, analytical tips. This gets into the critical thinking, the importance of information literacy, utilizing credible resources, not Wikipedia, not using what we call paper mills, like Course Hero, to complete your papers. If you do, when I run your papers through Grammarly, which you should be aware, when I run through Grammarly, I check for the grammar, but I'm primarily checking for plagiarism. There's a little box that I check, and it goes through and it tells me if that material came from one of those sources that are not so good. Now, I tell you the truth that you each have a Grammarly account that the school has paid for, and I'll share that with you on the resources tab in a few minutes, and I encourage you to utilize that, but make sure you check your Grammarly box before you send it. I've had a few people to tell me that their Grammarly percentage was different from mine. That's not possible because it's the same one that you have in terms of determining the percentage of plagiarism. It will also tell you places where that information that you include in your paper. So that's a practice that we discourage because it deals with academic integrity, and it could be a violation of the academic integrity policy, which we'll talk about a little bit. Okay, references for criminal justice students, how to properly cite things. Critical thinking video, this is a video that you can copy and paste to your browser, and if you copy and paste it to your browser, it will allow you to find information that you need in terms of research and writing papers. But this will really help you in terms of understanding what critical thinking is all about. Finally, in this section, rubrics are in each written assignment, which is called the course project in this course, located in each weekly written assignment. You'll see. And then the discussion post has a rubric that's a generic rubric. Now, I'm going to tell you up front that the thing to do well when it comes to discussion posts is, of course, get them in on time. As you discovered, your initial post and reply posts are due tomorrow. But starting and going forth, weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5, the initial posts will be due on Tuesdays, and the reply posts will be due on Saturdays. So you get them in on time, and the content of the discussion post should be detailed. It should demonstrate that you have applied some thought to what you're writing about. Brief statements, short one-liners will get you zeros because they're not complete discussion posts. Remember what the discussion post is all about. Since we don't get together physically, it's what we expect you to complete in terms of interacting with myself as well as interacting with your classmates. And that's where you interact primarily with your classmates, because you won't interact with them beyond that in terms of getting assignments completed and things like that, unless I authorize you to do so, and generally I don't do that. And also, one other thing, if your discussion posts are completed the week after this forum ends, which it ends on Saturday night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, there's a good chance you may not get any points at all. The only way you'll get points if you complete a discussion post or reply post on a Sunday after the discussions were due is if you had gotten your initial post in Tuesday through Saturday. If your discussion posts and your reply posts are both posted on that Sunday after the forum ended, you'll get 0 points because we moved on to another topic. Your live classroom lectures take place. Today is the first one. And by the way, I don't like to do these live lectures on Fridays. And I don't like doing them later in the week. So generally I do them earlier in the week. However, as you know, the class just started on Wednesday. And I had to do one lecture on Wednesday. And then for another class I already had, I had to do a lecture last night, very late, because we had graduations here in Illinois with the 3 campuses, Mokina, Romeoville, and Aurora, Naperville. Some of you may know about that. And so I did it at 9:30. So it left me with, I had to get week 1 in. So it was a choice, and I don't usually do weekends. So I had to do it today, so I was stuck with it. And today will be a little longer, and it says 6:30 to 8:30. That's wrong. I should have, oops, that was my bad. I think I put it in the message. Some people got it and understand that it really was not 6:30 to 8:30, but that it should have been 8:30. Let's see, let me fix that. It should have been 8:30 to 10, roughly 10 o'clock. I don't know if that's the reason why people aren't here, but that's generally not the case, because there are a lot of times students don't come to the live lectures. So anyway, tonight is going to start, of course, at 8:30 and then 10. No one checked in saying that they had come into the lecture, because I would get an email saying that people came in. And so each week, starting on Monday of next week. So Monday will be our normal day for the lectures for week 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 for the rest of them. Beginning this Monday coming up. And see, at the beginning of the week, that will give you a chance to get the lecture and then get all your information that you need for your assignments, because your assignments are going to be due the Sunday after the lectures take place. And I think you guys already know that. So, okay. And the lectures will be recorded, and they will be placed in this same box under recordings. And what I do is I convert them from WebEx to YouTube, and I will post it here, and I will also send each and every one of you a link, so you'll be able to get that completed, and you'll be able to take that, and you should be aware that with that being the case, you can take your recording and you can look at it on all kinds of devices without having to rely on the WebEx information, WebEx system for completing it. So I try to do things to help make it easier for my students. All right, so now let's go over here. There are course announcements, and one of the announcements deals with APA assistance, which I will open this up, and it gives you a link, and it's one of places where you can get help. And so if you clicked on this, it opens up the APA toolkit, and it gives you resources that I won't spend time going through that can help you, as well as a quick start video, so that you understand how APA operates. It is very, 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 very important that you understand APA. I'm going to share with you a big video in a few minutes on academic integrity that will explain to you why we do the things we do with APA. And so here's preventing plagiarism, and then there's just a whole lot of information here to help you out there. So I put that on my my home page so that you will have those resources there, but they're also available in other places. The writing process tells you the method and steps to go through in terms of your writing steps. I'm not going to read through that either. But then I'm going to go over the welcome announcement in a minute. But before that, I want to go to your resources tab, which is in the upper right-hand corner. And here you see again, there's information about APA. Grammarly, remember I talked about that earlier, creating a Grammarly account, dealing with plagiarism and grammar and spelling. And if you clicked on this, it will tell you how to create your account. But make sure you check the plagiarism box when you run your papers through. Some people will run their papers through and they won't check the plagiarism box. But make sure that you use the Grammarly version that is with the college. And you can get around using this code if you use your Rasmussen S-mail or student mail as to how you get that. So Grammarly is among one of the things, appointment with a librarian, okay? And then right now, I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to take this headset off, and I want you to pay attention to this video on academic integrity. You can go through yourself. So here it goes.
What is academic integrity? Academic integrity is making decisions in your academic life that are based on honesty, trust, fairness, responsibility, and respect. This means being honest in the work you do, while respecting the work that others do. So what is cheating? Cheating means distributing or receiving answers or information by any means other than those expressly permitted by an assignment's requirement or an instructor. Some examples of cheating include asking fellow students for answers or copying answers during a test, using notes, devices, or materials during a test that your instructor has not approved, purchasing papers from websites or other sources, copying your classmate's work, assisting a classmate in misconduct, and other violations as noted in the academic integrity policy that can be found in all course syllabi. Always ask your professor if it's okay to use notes during a test or to work together with classmates on an assignment or quiz. Now let's talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism means using another individual's work without giving them credit, or taking another person's work and claiming it as your work. Some examples of plagiarism are turning in an assignment that someone else wrote, copying words or ideas from someone else. This can be a library resource, course textbook, internet resource, or other material without giving the original creator credit. Failing to put quoted works in quotation marks, or using someone else's ideas in your essays, but changing a few of the words to make it sound like the words are your own. Plagiarism is not just about written words and ideas. It's possible to plagiarize images, graphs, coding, or video as well. So how can you avoid plagiarism? Cite your sources, both in the body of your paper as in-text citations and on your references page. Whenever you want to use words, images, media, or ideas that were created by another person, you should cite that person appropriately as the source of that information.
But how does academic integrity relate to the work world? Isn't it just a college thing?
No. Integrity in the workplace starts with good practices and skills built while you are a student. Would you turn in a project document to your manager as your own when someone else wrote it? Not if you want to keep your job. Individuals can be reprimanded or even fired from their job for plagiarism. Following academic integrity guidelines while you are in school builds those skills and ethical practices that carry through to the workforce.
Okay, I understand how they're connected, but what do I do if I need more help?
If you have questions on the academic integrity policy, consult your course syllabus, talk with your instructor or dean, and if you need assistance with APA citation style or how to avoid plagiarism, contact the Rasmussen library team through our live chat or schedule a research appointment on our library website or through the resources tab of your course. If you would like APA tutoring, schedule an appointment with one of our peer tutors on the course resources tab.
Okay, so you began to get the point about how to cite those sources and why it's important that you do that. Now, we have various resources here that are here to help you as well. Remember, there's also a guide by topic and subject, and you'll see that here. So here's the guide that takes you to, you can go to the Library and Learning Services home. This takes you to what you just saw a few minutes ago. And if you hover over any of these, they will give you details on all of these topics, from APA to Grammarly, to tutoring, to NoodleBib, webinar, writing guide, new student support, technical support, articles, and YouTube. And there are other things in here too as well. You should also be aware, going back to that, again, one more time, if you go down each School of Justice Studies, which is what you guys are in, and it gives you our own section that gives us guides. And we have people like Bethany Marston, who's a Learning Center coordinator, and Dennis Johnson, that's him on the left that you see here, with the smile there. And you can set up, set up a chat. It's offline right now, but there are hours that you can set up time. Research help, and it tells you chat hours as well, Monday through Thursday, 12 a.m. to 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday they're offline, but Sunday, 4 p.m. To 8 p.m. And then there's other tools in here that can help you. And if you go through each of these, how to do research, how to find sources, and things of that nature. That's why you can get credible resources that have been properly vetted out of our library and learning center sources. But we got stuff on Facebook, we got blogs, Twitter, and Pinterest and other places where you can find articles that pertain to criminal justice. So, so there's all kinds of places that you can find information, okay? So academic integrity, we're going to talk about a little bit when I show you the course syllabus for this course. As you'll see, the syllabus is the same pretty much in terms of responsibilities as far as academic integrity. It is the same for every class. And so we're going to deal with that. This tells you how to get tutoring if you need help as well. All right. So now let's talk about the transferable skills. As I said to you at the outset, that there were 6 transferable skills that we stressed to you throughout our courses here at Rasmussen College. By the way, just thought you should know, some of you may already know this, is that Rasmussen College will no longer exist as Rasmussen College as of October, and it's already been announced and released, and we will be called Rasmussen University, which is a step up for us. But it also, it doesn't change the way that we approach working with our students, and the academic standards will not be lowered, or they won't be higher because they're already high. And so each of us as instructors abide by those rules. So let's talk about critical thinking first of all. Now, you'll notice that these first 3 that we cover are for self-development and to help you in terms of operating as a student and then as a future professional. So critical thinking, the definition according to our school, is improving thinking, including problem solving and creativity, applying intellectual standards such as clarity, precision, logic, and reflection. What does all that mean? It means very simply being able to take the materials, analyze the materials, break the materials down, apply what you learn in your reading and your lectures and your research to the point that you can give us your views, your positions, that you can also find information to support the statements that you include in your written assignments, as well as with your oral responses when you have an opportunity to have oral responses. They're very limited in this class because we're online, but the point of the matter is that when you do find yourself in situations where you're going to be doing projects throughout some of these classes, where you're going to deal with independent study type situations, where you're going to do projects relating to the various areas that you have an interest in criminal justice. And so critical thinking is so important. I am a natural critical thinker because I went to law school, and we have what we call the Socratic method, but it brings on critical thinking because we're asked a series of questions until ultimately we get to the bottom of an issue. And then there's digital fluency, employing digital tools, being proficient at employing digital tools. See this thing right here in my hand? This is a digital tool. Almost every one of you have one. I would submit that all of you have one. And this has many apps on it, including one of which is called, what's the name? Bookshelf. And when I open up Bookshelf, it's kind of hard for you to see it because of the glare, but actually there are different books that we use in our classes. And one of the course classes is for drugs and crime. and it's actually loading up now on my system because I got a brand new phone recently here. And so it will show me in a few minutes, okay, my drugs and crime. So I can open it, get started, and there's my book. There it is right there. I can go chapter by chapter. I can go back to the beginning, and then this is the cover page for that particular book. So technology in terms of digital fluency is very important. Our books are digital. This course, Blackboard, being able to navigate and utilize the systems, being able to utilize resources like Word and PDF. You use Word more because Word is how your assignments are written, not PDF. Some students have provided PDF. And when you do, you get a 0, but you have to properly give me, because I can't edit or run through Grammarly PDF documents. Some students know that, and so they submit them. I'm one of those professors, I will not let it get by. So digital fluency is very important. Excel, learn how to use those spreadsheets in some classes that you have. You're going to learn how to use them professionally. You're going to learn how to use all kinds of resources, but digital fluency is so important because you're going to work on computers and you're going to do a lot of WebEx type situations, open meetings. There are so many different systems that people use, GoToMeetings that people use for that. So we're in a society where digital fluency is so important. When I came out of law school in 1978, nearly 43 years ago, there was no such thing. But now I'm adept at it because of the fact that that's where we are now. Information literacy, being able to get credible resources, know how to locate and evaluate and use those materials. You have to be careful about using Google and some of these other search engines because they will lead you to some things that are not vetted properly. And like I said, Wikipedia is a no-no because Wikipedia is a word-based website which anybody can change. And you should know that already. And therefore, information can be manipulated by anyone. Then, like they referred to earlier, using these paper mills like Course Hero to write your papers and taking information from there. I've actually had a few students who challenged me on it, and I asked them how come their papers contain paragraphs that were completely taken out of previously written papers, some by students and some by other people. And they've copied and used that material in their own and passed it off as their own. That is a problem when we deal with academic integrity as well. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So these first three are for self-development within yourselves: critical thinking, digital fluency, and information literacy. Now we get to the point where you're interacting with others as well. Communication is so important, displaying written and oral communication, nonverbal language, understanding body language, learning how to, if a person shakes their head this way, that's a universal no. This way is universal yes. This is I don't know. And then there are other body language signs. The point of the matter is communication is going to be so important, and in criminal justice it is very, very, very important because you're going to have to deal with people from various backgrounds, and we're going to talk about that more in detail under the ethics and diversity issue. But the point of the matter is that you must be proficient. That's why we check your writing. That's why we check your what you've done. Your reading is very important. If you look at my little mnemonic in the Course Student Lounge, Reading is one of the letters under the little word lawyers. R is for reading. Reading is essential. Very, very, very important. Oral communication, how you communicate with people on a professional level, and how you're able to reach people that are hard to communicate with as a professional, and you maintain your professionalism. The point of the matter is that it is so important in interacting with people. Diversity and teamwork. Diversity, for example, involves recognizing we are in a community or society where we have people from all walks of life, all sexual preferences. We have people who have different religious beliefs. We have people who have cultural celebrations that we must learn how to appreciate and respect. It doesn't matter whether you agree or not, but empathy is something that we should exercise among dealing with people. And this school is committed to diversity. We actually have a diversity and inclusion committee of which I'm a member of, and we are encouraged to not just give you the ability to be able to be respected, but also give you what we call inclusion, which means a seat at the table and the ability to be able to have your ideas be respected like everyone else's ideas. Demonstrating diverse backgrounds and perspectives. This country is made up of a country of immigrants, people from all over the world, all walks of life. And you are going to have to deal with those issues, especially in criminal justice. And then the final one is professional responsibility and ethics. Ethics. It is so important, as you heard said in the video. If you're an unethical student, you could be an unethical professional. Unethical professionals end up in bad situations. Imagine yourself as a law enforcement officer and you're operating with an unethical practice, and you could find yourself behind bars with some of the people that you sent or arrested away. Not a good place to be in. Plus, you can lose your livelihood and ability to make a living. So I tell students that I operate on the basis of teaching students from three perspectives: educational, ethical, and professional. That's what I expect students to understand and learn as students, and then transfer that into how you present yourself as a professional. So with this, you understand conduct and professional behavior and do things for the greater good. You don't find yourself in the code of silence if you're in law enforcement or any other area like corrections or any other. The point of that is, no, you have to operate as an individual, very ethical, and don't worry about the business. People say there's backlash, or, well, you could be ostracized and there could be backlash. But I said, worst comes to worst, you can end up like some of these professionals that I know, including law enforcement people who are behind bars. And so you have to understand that every entity has what we call professional responsibility. As a lawyer, we were held to a very high standard, that even there was one part of our professional responsibility is that we not involve ourselves in acts that even appear to be improper, even if they're not improper. The point, we call it the appearance of impropriety. So we get to the point that these are things that we are teaching you in school. I taught ethics in criminal justice. I taught medical law and ethics. I also taught business ethics at this school. And many people understand that I'm very fair, I'm firm, but I'm consistent, but I'm also going to operate on a high ethical level with each and every one of my students. So if you want to learn more about these transferable skills, there's more information in guides to transferable skills and other places as well. All right. So now that I've covered all of that, let's go back to the course homepage. Here we are. So now let's talk about the announcements, which you should have taken a look at, and because they were made available to you and will be sitting here for you to see. Notice the highlighted points. I recommend that you develop the habit of checking announcements on a regular basis, and post your introduction to Student Lounge so that we can learn more about each other. Your course mail is a tab that's right here on the left, right here, where it says course messages. And you'll find that information involving the course that I will be able to respond to, as well as you can send messages to me. These are private messages that are not for dissemination to the whole class. The syllabus, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, which sets out the policies, the academic integrity policy, attendance policy, late assignment policy, and we're going to talk about that. The course calendar is where you can click on and check everything. There's a place that you can click on at the top, and we're going to go to that in a few minutes, but I also use a section under course tools, which you don't have. As professors we have. So the calendar is very important for setting deadlines and dates. And then there's a general course question section found under discussions. If you go under discussions and click under discussions and come down, this is the Student Lounge thing I was talking about earlier. And then general course questions. That's this right here, where you can ask questions and post it, and anyone can answer those questions, students as well as myself. Okay, let's go back to that and get more of this. And then your resources tab you're familiar with, we just went over that. Your report tab is how you access your grade book, and you will discover in your grade book the rubric is there, but the rubric is also going to be seen by you before you get your grade. It's going to tell you what is expected, because in each of the assignments you'll see the rubric. And then these are a few more things that I've already talked about: APA, tutoring, chat with librarian. And then this reminds you of what I said. I knew I had it in the announcement. That's why it's important to read these. Friday, 8:30 to 10, and then weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 will be on 8:30 to 9:30, beginning this Monday coming up. All right. And then you're going to discover the lessons tab in each weekly module that we'll be doing a lot of lecturing out of that as well. So now let's take a look at the course calendar real quick. All right, so like I said, the course calendar, you can access it at the top, but it's the same one. This is just another way for us as professors to be able to get to it. And here it is. It tells you where we are here. It tells you that the class started on Wednesday, and if you clicked on this, it actually gives you the reading assignment as well, okay? And then this is where we are for the lecture. Again, the course calendar told you what time. So it wasn't 6:30, it was 8:30 that we had it for today. And then it tells you about your initial post and reply posts that are due tomorrow, the 15th. And then the quiz that is due on Sunday, the 16th. And then there's a key word. This is the quiz, which is timed. Should be aware of that, and we'll go over that in a minute. And then there is the key, there's the key phrase. I think it's, key phrase that'll be due Sunday as well. So each week, I mean, anytime you want to go through, you can look. You'll notice that starting Monday, the live lectures, and then every week there will be Monday on. Now, look at how fast this goes. By the time, this is week 1, this is week 2, this is week 3. So by the first or second of February, first or second of March, we will be in week 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll be in the second half of the course. So that's why it behooves you not to fall behind. And look at how fast this goes. You go to the rest of the calendar, and let me put this up here now. You see that this is weeks 4, that's 5, and then this is week 6. So you see that by the time you get to March, you got the second part. Now, I tell students up front that weeks 1, 2, and 3, after you complete those weeks, and we complete 4, I will not accept assignments from weeks 1 through 3 without some previous arrangements. Then you'll notice the last day of class is the 20th of March. The last day of class is the 20th of March. So I'll be talking about that every week. So that's pretty clear. So now let's go and take a look at the course syllabus, which I want to share with you. The course syllabus tells you some things: my name, my number that you know. There's my email. Now I actually have one. You don't have to put the 2 in, and I can get it through my regular mail, outside of course. Some students send me, but this is how, if you use course mail itself, it'll automatically put it right here. This is information repeating that I shared with you earlier. Description of the course, I'll move down. The course requirements. Now, discussion posts, I've already kind of talked about that and explained that, so I'll go on past that. You can also feel free to read this on your own. So your course requirements will consist of readings, discussion assignments, weekly, quizzes. There'll be 5 quizzes throughout the course, 5 quizzes, and a final exam. So what does that mean? Week 1, week 2, 3, 4, week 5, 4 and 5, there will be a quiz. Then the final exam will be the last day of class, the 20th of March. And then there will be a written assignment called course project, which is kind of like a misnomer. It means simply that you're not going to be preparing one major project. No, each one are going to be independent and independently graded. So there are going to be 4 course projects, and that's written assignments for week 2, 3, 4, and 5. As I said, week 6 there won't be one, and then this week there's not one. All right. Then your live lectures, and then this is a reminder of what I posted up here. There it is again, so you can't miss what I expect. Now, let me talk about this. This is how your distribution in terms of the course. Discussions are 60 points. That's because you get 10 points for each week. 5 for initial posts, 5 for discussion posts. That represents 16%. Some people will say, oh, well, that's not a lot. Yeah, it is. You can add up. Difference between an A and a B and a C and a D and a D and a F. But anyway, these are your quizzes that you will have. As I already told you, you'll have quizzes week 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you will have in week 5, week 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what it is. And then week 6, you'll have the final exam. The course projects, each week, you'll have those. And they total 160 points, almost half of the course. And then your live lectures, 30 points, which you get 6 points, 5 points rather, for each week. And as you get later, if it's due Sunday, which it is, by Monday it decreases to 4 points, and it goes down all the way to 0. So in other words, if you send me your key phrase a week after the lecture was, you're going to get a 0 when it comes to live classroom lectures. And then I want to tell you this up front. My goal is to get students from A to B, from 100 to no lower than 80%. Though my preference is up here. If you get below that and fall at 79 and below, you will be in C and heading with D and F territory. Do not ask me at any juncture in this course, how do I get a C or a D in my class? I'm not going to answer you, because you can do that all by yourself. You're paying good money. You have us as trained instructors in our fields that we worked in many years. I started practicing law in 1978. I retired in 2000. I actually worked with lawyers from the time I was 19 years old when I came out of high school. And I continued working with the legal field even after I retired. And now I teach. So the point of the matter is this. I know how to help you, and I'm here to help you. I'm not having you to agree with me on everything. I just want you, see, let me tell you something about the modules and the assignments and the rubrics. I am really dogmatic about making sure that you follow the instructions. I'm preparing you for professionalism. That is what is expected of you. Would you have to keep going back to your boss for something that you should basically know how to do? You could get fired. You won't get raises, and you'll have a bad reputation. The key is develop the thing that I developed when I was in college, even under adverse circumstances, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. Still, you have to work hard to get what you get. It doesn't matter how difficult it was. I know we had a gentleman last night who was a senator from Illinois, Senator McGuire. He said that he knew he wanted to get his degree, but he had algebra standing in the way. So he ended up having to do some extra stuff dealing with algebra. I know what he means, because I had algebra and math as my albatross, not basic math, but some of that algebra geometry to create challenges to me, but I did. I even took extra time during lunch to get it done. The point of the matter is that you don't want to run away from a challenge. You want to get into the habit of operating at high levels. I'm going to skip this. We already talked about transferable skills. I'm not going to talk about the attendance policy. I am going to talk about the late submission policy. Now, you should be aware that your due dates are contained in the calendar, they're contained in the announcement, they're contained in the actual assignment itself. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get into each assignment. But this says, and this is the policy of the school, you can submit an assignment up to 7 days after the deadline, but be aware that each day you lose 10%. So let's assume you have a really good paper on Sunday and it's perfect. Okay, you get 100%. That same paper, if you submit it on Monday, you could possibly get just a 90%. And each day, by the time you reach, Tuesday, it's going to be 80%. Wednesday, 70%. So you begin to see what I'm talking about. And by Thursday, that's the 4th day. It says 7. The point of the matter is that you'll be at failure. Your grade will be not passing. So the key thing is to get your assignments in on time. Now, it says here that in some cases, such as late discussion posting, students may be asked to complete an alternate assignment. May is the key phrase. I don't do that. I'm telling you up front. I had a student or a few students to come to me and say, I need to make up my work. Can I get a extra credit assignment? I said, how can you use the term extra credit for something that you haven't done everything? That's just like asking for overtime when it says above 40 hours and you work only 35. Can you get overtime? Yeah, if you go above 40. The point of the matter is if you go above 100%, then you can get extra credit. But the key thing is that the highest grade you're going to get is 100 anyway. You can't get 101. So the point of the matter is that, what am I saying? Get your assignments in on time. I already talked about online discussion posts, and so I'm going to go past that. Now, I do want to bring you to the next statement. It is not all doom and gloom, because everybody should understand that Professor Wright understands that life happens. I understand that things happen. I'm very empathetic when it comes to my students. And I'm pretty flexible with dealing with the late assignment policy, because it says what I'm going to read. Instructors may waive the late penalty or time frame in the case of extenuating circumstances. And it says, as not identified by your dean. I had a student one time that told me, they said that they were going to tell their dean that I refused to extend their due date. And the reason they gave me was they said that they had a planned family vacation and that they were going to be late for starting classes, and they had spent their money. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that, because that's unfair. You have to make sure that you plan your time and that. But there are other situations, and so the dean actually came back and says, I'm sorry, I'm not intervening in that. You could go all the way up to the president of the university and the college. I'm saying, well, college now, university coming in October, but the school here, and you'll have the same thing. So what's the long and short of it? I am the one who makes these decisions. Even when it comes to dealing with the incomplete policy, which I won't elaborate on, I'm the one who has to grant it, all right? And I'm not going to talk about that. So anyway, don't worry about trying to come to me about activities for labs and other things like that. The point of the matter is get your assignments in on time. And then if you run into a situation that I deem as extenuating circumstances, and extenuating circumstances are determined on a personal one-by-one basis. One thing I can tell you up front is if you're in the military and you are at a situation where I have a student that I'm doing in one of my 11-week classes, the only 11-week class I'm doing, and he's in I think he's in Iran or Iraq. Anyway, that's where he's deployed. So he has no deadlines that his assignments can be late, because of the fact that I understand the situation and circumstances that he's placed in as his commitment to serve in the military. But, you know, I don't ask people to give me copies of their orders. I don't ask people to give me copies of their obituaries. I don't ask for your note from your doctor. You're adults, because I already told you about the ethical issue. If you're going to be playing the game here, it's going to catch up with you. Trust me. So now let's move on to the last part, and that's the academic integrity policy. You'll have a chance to go and read this. But I do want to talk about the plagiarism thing again, and it tells you things that you already heard in the video. And one of the things is G3, use an academic exercise in whole or in part, purchased or copied from a ghostwriter or paper essay mill, like the one I mentioned earlier. And so students should be aware. We want you to develop and utilize that creative mind. And so anyway, for violations, you could end up being dismissed from the class or even from the whole school itself. So anyway, you have a chance to, you can go on and you can read that. So now let's show you how each module works. So we're going to start with today's module. And let's go in and look at it. I haven't asked any questions yet, because my key thing is to make sure that you understand what's going on here. I will be asking questions in the regular lectures. So now let me show you what the typical assignments are like. Now, this week you're not going to see the rubric, because I already told you about the generic rubric for discussion posts. But I will tell you that the quiz has a due date. So if you click, this is where if you click on the assignment itself, it will open up and it will tell you the test time. It'll tell you that it automatically submits a grade. The timer will continue even if you leave the test, and then when it is due. Okay? So you'll see that. And then the live lecture, you'll see when that is due. You see that the same day, Sunday. All right? And so each week you'll get your assignments. So I'm not going to spend much time here because it's pretty clear: quiz, discussions, and so now I want to go into showing you the other section where you get, oh, by the way, dealing with assignments, when you get next week, you'll see more of this. But in each week, you'll see this. It's called the Drugs and Crime Course Guide. This will help you during your coursework. And all you do is click on it, and it will open up to the online library for the course. This is for the course itself. I already showed you the general one, and it tells you about each weekly module all the way through, and then it deals with the APA toolkit, which you kind of are familiar with already from what I shared with you as well. So the Drugs and Crime course has been put together to help you with research, tools, ebooks, APA, and other things of that nature. And there are videos within it to help you find things like newspaper articles and other things. The point of the matter is that this is available to you, and every week you'll see it. So now let's what is the lesson content? The lesson content actually starts out with the objectives, and then it gives the assignment, reading chapters 1 and 2. Again, keep your eye open for the rubric, not the rubric, but for the PowerPoint for week 1 and 2 that I will be sending to you after this class is over. And so usually I will talk about these topics. I want tonight, Controlled Substances Act. Controlled Substances Act, there's an activity that you can do. You'll see it. Narcotics, amphetamines, cocaine, marijuana, and synthetic drugs. And then course project introduction, which will be coming starting in week 2. And then discussion, the quiz, and that. So in this area here, we'll go through normally, and we will talk about these things. But I'm not going to do that today because I want to make sure that I keep you not too late tonight. And then control. Now, here's the activity. Now, what you do is you'll have a chance to review the material. This helps you. Actually, it helps you prepare for the quiz. And it asks you what schedule each of these would be on. And so you'd have to just line up and put it where it's supposed to be. See, if it doesn't, it's not, peyote is not 3. It's not 4. I already know which one it is. It's not 2. It's 1. So you keep going. PCP, schedule 2. Nope. Is it schedule 3? There you go. Antibiotic steroids is either going to be schedule 3 or 4. Nope. And then you know Valium is the last one. And so then you go to the next one. And you go through the same process. This is, I'm just showing you what you can do on your own as you go forth. All right. And then these are different areas. What are narcotics? What are amphetamines? What is cocaine? Marijuana? We'll be talking all these during the course of the weeks to come. But you could go and you can take time to study this. Synthetic drugs, these are drugs that are made up, and we're gonna be discussing them more in details in weeks to come. Okay, so starting next week, you're going to have a written assignment called Course Project, and we're going to deal with heroin and opioids and synthetic drugs. And we're going to deal with all of these in this project. Now, notice what's going to happen. Starting in week 2, the topic is going to be, what is heroin? Week 3, heroin and crime. Week 4, heroin and opioids, law enforcement perspective. We'll be talking about each of these during these lectures in weeks 2, 3, 4, and then week 5, heroin and addiction, one person's journey. So you'll have a chance to do this. Each of these are going to require that you have a minimum of 3 credible and reliable sources. I already told you how to find them. You cannot, you see how capitalized it is? Your book as a reference for any part of the course project. Okay? If you do, you're going to lose points. You cannot use Wikipedia because it's not credible. I already talked about that. You may include some pictures in your paper, but doing so is not required. But keep in mind what it's going to tell you. It's going to tell you how many pages that you need to have. So it tells you in this week, there's not an assignment to submit for the course project, but you need to begin reading right away about the heroin epidemic. And then in week 2, and then in week 3, and then in week 4, and then in week 5, you will have that, and then there won't be 1. So it'll be 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then it says each assignment is evaluated and graded independently, and the criteria will be provided starting next week. So you'll have a chance to see that. Do you have any questions so far about anything? You can type in the chat box yes if you do, or chat no. Any questions about anything? No questions. Okay. Thank you, Kara. I think, haven't I had you for some other classes before? Yep, I recognize names. I recognize names. And so, welcome again. And so you already know some things about me. As a matter of fact, you're going to know what I'm getting ready to talk about in a minute, but I'm going to have to talk about it anyway. So anyway, so no questions at this particular point. So like I said again, I will give you the PowerPoints after that. All right. So now I want to explain to you what I mean about adversity is the springboard to success. Again, I need to give a key phrase, but I'll give it to you at the end. So just hold on. I want students to understand who I am, where I'm coming from. When I say adversity springboard to success, I'm saying it from the perspective that my personal life emanates that, and that motto is actually me. And so I'm going you to understand where I will fit in terms of dealing with each and every one of you, and why I'm going to appreciate professionalism, candid, honesty, ethical, and if you need help, I'm here to help you, because I want you to be a good criminal justice professional. So this all started with yours truly when I was 7 years old, 1957, Memorial Day. My dad and I went to a baseball game, and we came home to our house. We were living in the west side of Chicago, and at that time, we had a gentleman who was a roomer that had rented a room. Well, that day, myself and my 5 younger sisters, and like I said, I was 7, and we were pretty much stair-step. And we had one bedroom that we all slept in. We had bunk beds in there. And so anyway, a fight broke out that evening in the house. And the fight ended up in the bedroom where us 6 kids, 5 girls and myself, were sleeping. Well, the commotion actually woke me up, and maybe my sisters. But next thing I knew, the man who lived with us, his name was Scott, Webster Scott. For many years, I couldn't say his name, not because legally, but it was hard for me to just even say his name because of what you will learn about what he did. And so anyway, the next thing I knew, him and my dad were fighting. My dad was pinned in the corner, and the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a switchblade and stabbed my dad in the forehead. And my dad bled profusely. I'll never forget what happened in that room because I have a photographic memory, unless I get Alzheimer's or something like that. But I will never forget that day. The guy ran out of the room. A few minutes later, the police came. They took my dad, and I remember his eyes were open. Blood was all over his face. The knife was in his head, and they carried him out. So my dad died. So the next time I saw him was in a casket. He looked different then, but anyway, it was a challenge for me. So Scott ran out of the house. A few days later, he appeared back in the house. Now, I don't understand what happened then. I know now. And it turned out that he was not prosecuted because there was no evidence that he wasn't defending himself. But that wasn't true. And the only ones who could talk about it were kids, and 7-year-old being the oldest, and that's yours truly. And they wouldn't call on this. The other person who knew what happened was my mother. It turned out that they were having an affair, and that's what the fight was all about. And it cost my dad his death. So anyway, the guy moved out of the room that he was renting and then began sleeping with my mother after my dad was buried. And for the next, from 57 to 62, in that house that we lived in on the west side, my mother was the victim of domestic violence at the hands of this guy. I mean, I'm serious. It was some bad stuff. It was horrible. And I remember my mom was so disfigured. But this guy would go to jail, and guess who would be there to pick him up and bring him back home? My mother. And she'd bring him back home, and he'd keep doing it. And people had warned her about he's going to eventually kill her. So anyway, the area started changing. There were gangs in the area. It was a Jewish community when we first moved there in 1950. And so it started changing after 57. And by the time 62 came, it was pretty bad. There was two gangs, the Viceroys and the Cobras. But each of the gangs made a decision to do something that was highly unusual, but the gangs operated differently than they do now. And what changed it was the introduction of drugs and high-powered weapons. Anyway, they agreed not to recruit me because they knew what I had gone through as a kid. And I was off limits to both gangs. So anyway, my mom still decided she didn't want to stay in the area. And so she bought a house and rented out our 2-flat that we were living in. We lived on the first floor, and people rented the second floor, and moved to Gary, Indiana, in an area called Terrytown. And we ended up moving into a nice home. This was the first time that yours truly had his own bedroom. And my sisters, by this time, I should say, were not 5, but 7, because she had 2 kids by Scott, but they were my sisters. And so anyway, we moved to Gary. And we moved to Gary, one of my aunts came from Michigan to stay with us. And while she was there, nothing happened because she was kind of like the character called Medea that Tyler Perry created. So it was not much happened bad there because he didn't mess with this woman. So anyway, my mother had a restaurant with a cousin of ours who also lived in Gary, in downtown Gary. Well, my aunt who was staying with us decided she would leave and go back to Michigan to be with her husband after around the beginning of May of 63. She moved back, and after that, it was not really a whole lot going on. There was arguments and stuff like that. But now let's come to Memorial Day of 1963, which was the 30th of May. Back in those days, Memorial Day was celebrated on the actual date, which was the 30th. No matter what day of the week it was still considered as the actual holiday. So my mom left me in charge of the house, and my younger sisters and I was the one who watched over. I was responsible for making sure that the house was cleaned and everything. As we did many years, we had celebrations, barbecue, and there was a lot of drinking and stuff like that was taking place. All kinds of activities taking place, card games, all kinds of things. Anyway, so Memorial Day of '63, my mom left and told me to take care of the house. She was going to go to her restaurant and meet our cousin. Well, later on that night, we all, I got everybody ready for bed, and we went to bed. And woke up early the next morning. There was smoke in the house. And I got up and I looked in the kitchen. I said, everything's clean. What is this? Opened the oven, and there was some barbecue that was in there that was smoking, that had been in one of those roasters. But anyway, someone had turned on the oven. Well, we would later find out it was Scott who had turned on the oven. Well, I looked outside, and my mother's car that they had, that they shared, it drove away. I looked in my mom's room. Her bed hadn't been slept in, but as I said before, that wasn't an unusual occurrence. So anyway, I cleared the smoke and went back to bed, and then got up sometime later that day, probably like midday. Two gentlemen came to the door, identified themselves as Gary police officers, and they announced that my mother, whose name was Sarah, was found dead in the city of Chicago. I lost it, guys. I started screaming and hollering this guy's name, Scott, Scott. And then I looked around and I said, oh my God, my sisters, all they have now is me as the oldest. I was 13. I had just turned 13 May 3rd of 1963. So here we were, fatherless and motherless. Well, others came and got us and took us and told us we were going to stay at her house temporarily, but we were going to earn our keep, and we were going to work to earn our keep. I mean, we were like servants in the house. She had kids, but her kids could do things and go to the Y and participate in things, and we weren't allowed to do that. I remember they had pizza, and they would send the crust, or either what was left over, pieces, to us, and we would eat that. It was bad. So anyway, my aunt announced that we were going to be split up and sent to various places. Well, my aunt, the one that came from Michigan, got wind of it, and she came back and she made a statement that's not going to happen. She says my mom wouldn't have wanted that, and so she's taken all 8 of us, and we're going to have a house built, and she did. And so anyway, it was a nice house. Again, I had my own bedroom once again, and her husband and I began to clash immediately because he wanted me to take his name, and I didn't want to take his name because I was the only one who could carry on my dad's name, because I figured the girls were going to get married. But I found out too that this man and I, we just didn't get along at all. He had 2 sons that would come and stay with us, and they tried to a couple of times corner me and beat me with their fists. And because I said I'm going to be somebody, and they would try to fight me because of that. I wasn't loud or boisterous or belligerent individual, but I had something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be somebody. I didn't know what it was I wanted to be exactly when we first moved in the house. In 64, that's when we moved into that house. Well, I found out years later, just speeding ahead, that the man actually went through sexually my sisters. So, and it was my aunt and uncle used to pull guns on each other, and they would fuss and cuss and fight. So here I am, still in a bad situation. So in 1964, two things happened. Number one, I found out that Scott pled guilty, and he was being sentenced to 10 years. But 10 actually meant 5 back in those days. And for good behavior, he would serve 3.5 years. And that would be the sentence that he would receive. Think of it, guys. 3.5 years for killing 2 people. I was very troubled. And when I get troubled, I ask questions. And I was actually shut down many a times about it. But I still had to get to the bottom of it. Then finally, somebody came forth and said, well, that's just the way the legal system is, and it's operated by these people called lawyers. And I said, tell me about them. And people started explaining to me about lawyers, or also known as attorneys. And I went to school. I was in 8th grade. And I asked the librarian if they had any books. And he had one book on attorneys, and I said, could I check this book out? And she said, yes. I took the book home, put it in my bag, and read it that night, cover to cover. The next day, after I read that book, before I even took it back to school, I would introduce myself and tell people I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, when I did that, it made it even worse, because my uncle would laugh, and then my aunt, remember the one we stayed with that said she was going to split us up and we had to earn our keep? She said, you're aiming too high. She says you should try to do something along with a trade, which I have no problem with people doing that, but that wasn't what I was going to do. So I learned something, people, and I'm going to tell you, I never told any of these people, I'm going to show you. I don't believe in that. I believe in doing it. And the old ad that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and actions speak louder than words. So let my action speak for me. So in the meantime, I went through so many challenges that I got tired of dealing with my aunt and uncle. And I heard this lady on the radio, and I liked her voice. And I went and found her and asked her to be my mother. Her name was Mary D. And we became friends. But my aunt would always tell her, when I told her the story about what happened, that I had mental problems, and that the story wasn't true, and that my parents were gone away, and that's why she's got us. And she warned me not to talk to this lady about this much. And I wasn't a kid who disobeyed, but I couldn't keep that in. Couldn't keep that in. That's a good thing, because I talked about it to almost everybody in the community, including the local church in the area. And by the way, the lady, we became friends. My aunt would let me go visit her sometime, and I was glad to get out of the house, because I had a job as a paper boy in the mornings, and then until 67, when we had a blizzard, and I quit doing the paper route. And then I started working at McDonald's after school. I gave up the sports that I was involved in, baseball, basketball, and was even in wrestling for a bit, and then was attempting to take up football, but I was so small. I was like Rudy, if you know the movie. I was just a little guy. The point of the matter is, I was doing anything to stay out of the house. So I became involved with many surrogates in the neighborhood, friends of mine that I met through the church and at school, and I would go to their houses and spend a lot of time with them and then come home and go to bed. The church took an interest in me and told my aunt and uncle that they had a scholarship that they were willing to give me, but it needed their signatures. My uncle said no. In fact, I couldn't even get a driver's permit because I had to get his permission. The answer was no. So I made a statement when they said they would give the scholarship and they said they would not sign it. I said, it's okay. I'm still going to do this. I announced then that I'm going to be moving out of the house when I graduate from high school. And I did. So it came time for me to graduate from high school in 1969, which was 50 years ago this past year. We just celebrated our 50th class reunion from Fanger High School in the south side of Chicago. And so one of my friends' mom and dad let me come and stay at their house. I then registered at night for classes at the City Colleges of Chicago, a school called Loop College, which is now called Harold Washington City Colleges of Chicago. And I began studying, but here's what else happened. That same family had a friend downtown who got me a job in the mailroom of a big Jewish law firm. Well, I was on my way. People laughed because they said, you said you're going to be a lawyer, but now you're a gopher. I'm one of those people that I would introduce myself to everybody, like I said, including those lawyers, and tell them that I was going to be a lawyer. And what happened along the way is I began to demonstrate academically that I was on the dean's list and studying. I didn't have a car. I studied on the L and on the train. I had to catch two buses and one L train. I had to be at work at 8:30, and I had to be in class at 4:30, Monday through Thursday, and then on Saturdays I took classes from 9 to 12. All that on public transportation, all that carrying books, because we didn't have digital stuff then. In the meantime, I decided 1 year out of law school, the young lady I had been dating, we got married. That was in 1970. I was still 19 then. I was going to be 20 in May, so it was in March. And we got married, and she graduated in June of that year, and then she started school studying to be a teacher, and I continued in classes. Here's 71, girl number 1. Here's 72, girl number 2. So here I am now with 2 children, and the mailroom job changed because the law firm saw how I was, and they moved me into the file department and gave me a job as a file clerk, gave me some more money. And they would celebrate me all the time because they knew that I was on a mission to become a lawyer. They knew I was serious. I didn't just talk about it. And so they posted my grades around the law firm and everything. So I earned the respect of these lawyers. And so while I was in the file department, the guy who was the librarian, he died suddenly. And they came and put me in a meeting and asked me if I would be willing to become a law librarian. I said I didn't have any training, but I could learn this, and I did. And I became the law librarian at the law firm. A few more bucks. But how do you say I'm moving closer to where I want to go? And so while I was a law librarian, I would sit and I'd have to file away the books. I have to keep the services up to date of the books because there was no electronics around for research. There was books. and I would have to shelve the books and things like that. But I would sit there and listen to the lawyers. And what I did was they discovered that I taught myself how to do legal research. I told them, I said, I can write memos. And I listened very carefully, because what happened is they discovered that one occasion they came in looking for some cases that they needed for one of the projects they were working on. And I knew what they were talking about, and I didn't tell them. When they went to lunch, I took my lunch period, and I went and found all those cases, stacked them up, and bookmarked them, covered them with the legal pad says do not touch. So one of the lawyers comes to me and says, I can't find any of the cases. They're all gone from the shelves. Where are they? Do you know somebody might have some of these books? And they were mentioning them. I said, yeah, here, come here, let me show you. And then I showed them that pile. They said, who did this? I said, I did this. They said, come with me, and took me to the big boss in the law firm. And he said, we're wasting our money on this kid as librarian storing. He can research. So what they did was they turned me into what was called then a law clerk, which is still known today as a paralegal. I began to go to court with the lawyers. I began to go to real estate closings, corporate meetings. In fact, backing up a little bit, when I was a kid in the mailroom, I used to dress with a shirt and tie. And the guys, most of them would wear polo shirts. But I took a package one day to a gentleman by the name of Ray Kroc. And some of you may or may know who Ray Kroc is, because they did a movie about his life. Mr. Kroc was the chairman and founder of McDonald's. And he and I became friends. And he learned to respect me. And so anyway, I was doing pretty good. So anyway, comes time for me to leave the junior college. And I had chosen that I was going to go to a four-year institution called Roosevelt University and study. I was studying pre-law at the junior college, so I was going to study political science. And I majored in political science and minored in accounting. And I continued to excel and get good grades. And I ended up reaching the point in '74 where it was time for me to take the LSAT test for law school. Well, I didn't do too well with that, but that didn't discourage me, because I still said, I know I can, my grades were really good. So anyway, people would ask me, well, what school you want to go to for law? And I said, I'm going to Northwestern University. They said, oh, do you know how tough it is to get in there? I said, if somebody else can get in there, I can. I wasn't cocky or arrogant. I was just confident in myself. So I ended up getting their application, and I sat down and filled it out. Now, it was about 6 or 7 pages long. I had read in their catalog that they talked about that they have a high number of applications. Thousands of people were vying for 250 seats. So it was a challenge. But that didn't discourage me. And the rule of thumb was you would apply to 3 schools so that you can have backup. I said, I'm not doing that. And I didn't. So I put my package together, but then I added some additional information and put in a big box and sent it over to the law school in Chicago, downtown. And the package was delivered, and it was about this thick. It was a pretty thick little package. It had all kinds of writing samples. It had a written version of the story about my life that I'm sharing with you that's more in detail than what I'm giving you. And so anyway, I ended up getting a call and was invited to come to the campus. And I was told up front that they didn't do these kind of interviews, but they were curious about this person behind this package. They had never seen anything like this. So they sat me down and questioned me for several hours. It seemed like 2 hours or so. It wasn't grilling. It was just asking me questions, and I'd answer them. Finally, they decided, okay, give us a few minutes, and they adjourned. It seemed like they were gone for as long as they were questioning me, but they really weren't. They came back, and one of the persons said, Richard, we like what we read and we heard. We think you'll be a good candidate, but we don't make decisions like this. But what we will do with you is we're going to send you some correspondence in the next few weeks. And I think you'll be happy with what you read. Well, that was their informal way of telling me that I was accepted, and then I did get accepted into the class of 78. And I graduated with honors from Roosevelt in June of 75. I ended up being enshrined in what's called the Lincoln Academy down in Springfield, where the governor gave me an award on the House floor. So I was written up in newspaper articles and interviewed on television. The school, Roosevelt University, selected me to go down to Springfield out of 5,000 graduates. They learned my story. They learned about me, and I became the representative at the Lincoln Academy in 1975. My name is permanently enshrined down there. I take my kids down there to see. So anyway, starting classes in August of 75 at Northwestern Law School. It became clear to me that they didn't have any night classes, and it became clear to me that I had to stop working and give my time to studying, because it was very intense. So I did that. My wife at that time, with our 2 kids, she graduated, and I graduated the same year, and she became a teacher, and that's how the family was supported while I went through my first year of law school. Soon as school started, after Labor Day in September, the teachers went on strike. And when they went on strike, it put a lot of stress on us. We lost our income. We couldn't pay for the electricity. And what ended up happening is that I had to end up studying gas by candlelight, using flashlights and stuff when I studied at night. I did, because I was determined. We took the kids and sent them to their grandmother, she didn't live too far from where we lived. And so, at any rate, we found ourselves in a dilemma. So I reached a stage where I told one of my professors, her name was Joyce Hughes. She is right there now at the law school, still teaching and helping students. I go back and see her periodically. And she sat me down, because when I told her what I was going to do, she said, come to my office before you do that, and sat me down and stood in front of the door and made me promise that I would work it out. And she would help me, not financially, but she would help me. And so I ended up weathering the storm and made it through, and then graduated 3 years later in 1978. So it was the right thing. By the way, the strike ended after about a month or so. So it started working itself out, but it was still a challenge and a struggle trying to catch up on things. So anyway, while I was in law school, I met a gentleman who was one of my classmates. He was actually the class in front of me. His dad was a distinguished criminal defense attorney. And several of us would go to this classmate's house. And so anyway, his dad learned of my story of my life, and he told me I needed closure. So he helped me by taking me over to what's called the Layton Courthouse now, the main courthouse in Cook County. and got me the records for what happened with my dad and what happened with my mom. In the meantime, I found myself in the situation where he says to me, Richard, if you really want to learn about how things work here, you'll want to be a criminal defense attorney. Now that sounds really, really, really like a tough thing to take for a person who went through what I went through. But I am one who respects professionalism, and I'll take on a challenge. So I'm working at the, by the way, I had gone back and I was working part-time at the law firm doing corporate law. And then sometimes they had criminal cases, and I would, go with them. Remember when I was a paralegal, and then when I would work as a lawyer, law clerk in the summer while I was in law school, then I ended up working some criminal stuff. Well, finally, when I graduated, 1978, I ended up staying at the law firm for a couple years. And then I left in 1980 to work with some lawyers, and their ethics weren't so good, so I started Richard H. Wright and Associates, attorney at law. And I began doing appearances on various radio stations and developed a radio show called Know Your Rights, which was spelled W-R-I-G-H-T-S. I acquired the phone number 974-4487, which spelled W-R-I-G-H-T-S on the phone dial. And I was doing pretty good. By the way, by the time I graduated from law school in 1978, there came my third daughter. She'll be 43 in October, because I always figured that out from the year I graduated. So anyway, I was doing pretty well. My wife and I were heading in different directions in life. There were some beliefs that we clashed on as far as religious beliefs, and so we ended up parting company, and we ended up getting divorced. And when we got divorced, I ended up finding myself in a situation where it was a challenge, because I liked marriage, but I had some issues I had to work out myself, and based on my childhood that I never resolved because I got married right out of high school. Well, I began to meet various people from the churches in the city, and then one day, after I was divorced, this young lady came to my office, and I ended up representing her. And then we started dating, and we ended up, I ended up coming to her church, and their motto was "God is able," which became my motto. And to this day, not only is it my motto as well outside of of adversity springboard to success, but it's also the name of the church that I pastor now. So anyway, I found myself going in another direction in life, a more positive direction. I joined their church, and then here comes child number 4. Yes, it was a girl. And so I found out, though, when we were married, that my pastor, who was her pastor at that time, and her had been carrying on, and we ended up getting a divorce. Now, but before that, let me say this. Between the time we were married, her mother became the village president or mayor of a tough town in the south suburbs called Ford Heights. She invited me to become her village attorney, and I took the job, but I said that I needed to carry a gun. Said, you can't carry a gun unless you're a police officer. So I says, well, can I be a voluntary part-time police officer? She said, yes, but you must go through the certification process with the state, and I did. And I became a part-time police officer. Well, quickly it became clear that the chief of police, who was my ex-wife's mother's live-in boyfriend, was a crook, and his ethics as a police chief. So he ended up having to step down, and another chief was brought in. The other chief found out that I was a clean guy and that I was honest and I had integrity, and so I became an investigator. And so I began watching and see what was going on with the police as well as internal affairs. I used to participate in drug raids and all of those things with the various jurisdictions surrounding that area. Ford Heights was a pretty tough place. It was called the crack cocaine of the south suburbs. So I did that, 89 to 93. And so it was after her mother lost the election in 93, re-election, and my ex-wife and I found out at the end of 93 that she and the pastor had been carrying on, and so we ended up splitting up and got a divorce. I got a divorce, and it was pretty tough on me. So I went to this bookstore, this Christian bookstore, and because I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't do drugs, and none of those kind of things. I found myself in a situation where I went to this Christian bookstore, and this young lady I met there, and we became friends. And then we started dating, and we ended up deciding to get married, and we got married. Well, that young lady that you see in the picture, who is my wife now, 25, heading on 26 years, that is the person that I've been with and have been blessed with and happy to have. And so she and I then, we got married in 94, here in 95, here comes a son. in 2000, here comes a daughter at the beginning of the year. The end of the year, that same year, here comes a son. And then finally, 2008, here comes the last piece of the puzzle. So therefore, I have at home now 2 boys and 2 girls. And so I found myself in a situation where I decided, and I went to seminary, 91 to 93. I went to school to prove to kids in 2003 that you needed more than a bachelor's, and I applied for the MBA program at the University of Illinois, Chicago, which I did for about almost 2 years before I was in a car accident, and I was doing well there. So at any rate, I took on challenges. I also at that same time began teaching special education, dealing with at-risk kids at all levels, particularly in high school. And then I started running a janitorial company for a company called Service Merchandise, which went under in 2001. And then I started doing closings for a title company. And I did that for several years. And finally, it was brought to my attention that this school, which I had never heard of, was looking for someone to teach at their school. And the name of the school was Rasmussen College. I had never heard of it. And I did some research to find out. It says, oh, this is a for-profit school. I said, no. But I said, let me just do some more research. I found out that the chairman of the board was a former president of Northwestern Law School, but Northwestern University, which gave credibility. And I ended up applying for the job to teach business law and started October 2011 at Rasmussen College on a residential basis. And so I did that. I Rasmussen, I made it known to the dean that I was a criminal justice person, and the following quarter, they moved me to criminal justice. And I started teaching domestic violence. I began teaching a bunch of courses, and they were residential at that time. So then it became known to me that they were going to start online courses about 2013 or something like that. And I said, oh my God, I have to learn this. And I did. And there was a challenge, people, and I took it on. And I studied and learned the processes that made me really good at utilizing technology. By the way, I started using computers in 1999. So I had been using them all about 11 years or so. So I was kind of getting pretty good at that. So anyway, when it came to teaching online, it was totally different. So I took the job as an adjunct. And then finally, in 2014, an opening came for what they called the State Program Coordinator, the School of Justice Studies at Rasmussen College. And I applied for that position. And yes, I got it, which made me responsible for the Criminal Justice Program, School of Justice Studies program in the state of Illinois for all 4 campuses, the Romeoville, Mokina, and Aurora campuses, and then one in Rockford. And so I did that for about a year, and they gave me 3 classes along with that. Well, I was full-time now, and that was in 2014 in June. We came to like 2015, a year or so later, almost 2016, they came and decided to restructure and do away with state program coordinators. And so they then gave me 2 more classes. And since that time, I've been teaching five classes every quarter. Classes started changing from 11 weeks now to 5.5, which almost all our program is 5.5 weeks, and I love it. And so I formed relationship with many students during that period, friends that are friends even now that reach out to me back from and I mentor many of these students. I have students that want to be lawyers. I got one in particular. She is a corrections officer, and so I started working with her and dealing with her. Matter of fact, I'm doing something right now for her that she wants to become a lawyer, so I'm going to help her. But many of my students became friends of mine on Facebook and other social media, and I invite all of my students to join me. I just posted Richard Wright, JD, and if you send a friend request, then I will add you in. Many of my students have had me to write letters of recommendation. Sometimes I got real busy and I couldn't get them all done, but the point of the matter is I'm here to support my students. I always share with students that when you leave my class, I'm still here for you. I had the pleasure last night to be at the graduation at the Rialto Theater in Joliet, where the Mokina campus, the Romeoville and Aurora campuses. I had a chance for the first time to meet 4 of my students face to face. They knew what I looked like because you see me online. But it was really a thrill and excitement for me. And it's exciting for me to have students to thank me. In fact, I have one student who gave me his sash because he said I inspired him, and that was down in Florida, because I surprised one of my students by showing up at his graduation at my own expense from Chicago down to Tampa, Florida. Well, the graduation was in Newport Richey. But I believe in that. I'm a supporter of my students. And I ask you to understand that I understand that you're going to have adversity. I understand that life happens. I just went through this past quarter here with the flu. I had it was a real challenge. I hadn't had the flu since the 80s, but it knocked me flat on my back, and I worked my way through to help catch up in my grading with my students. But and as many of you are still even battling it now, and I'm still not as strong as I am going to be, just gradually getting my energy back. But the point I'm just telling you is this. When I say adversity is a springboard to success, I'm not talking something that's out of the blue. I'm talking about my life. I believe that I have had this thing that happened to me to be able to help many of you. And I was sent to Rasmussen College. I had, by the way, opportunity to go to other schools for even more money, but I believe in the vision of this school. I believe in the leadership of this school. And I'm excited, as I said, that starting in October, it will become Rasmussen University. I'm excited to be a part of that. But I'm more excited because of my student involvement. That's why I'm the only professor that you'll ever hear say, you can text me, call me, email me any hour of the day, the 25th hour of the day. And so with that, I just wanted to share that with you. So now I want to give you a key word before I let you go. And that key word is a phrase. And you need to listen to it carefully because it's right there in front of you. Adversity is the springboard to success. That's what I need you to give me. I'll repeat it again. Adversity is the springboard to success. And you'll be able to find it every week, me reminding you of that. And so with that, I appreciate it. We went 10:30, a little longer, but I knew it was going to happen. My wife and I are going to celebrate Valentine's Day tomorrow night because she knows my commitment to getting my work done for my classes and students. So with that, I'm going to say good night. I appreciate you hanging in there, Kara, even though you've heard this before. As many of you who will hear this tape, look at it, please remember one thing. I believe in producing educated, ethical, and professional criminal justice students. Because I want you to be good. Because the system let me down because of lack of professionalism, lack of good work. I'm teaching you guys how to be good so that the system does work. It works when a person shouldn't be incarcerated. It works when people are incarcerated and come out and need help. It works when a prosecution and defense side, but it all must be done under the guise of those three things: ethically, professionally, and based on you being educated. So with that, I'm going to say good night. I'll see you guys Monday night, and the lectures will most of the time be pretty close to an hour. We have some videos that I will be sharing with you that are in this class because you're going to hear me talk about over and over and over. There is a correlation between drugs and crime, and I'll elaborate on that in the future. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you, and have a good weekend, and happy Valentine's Day to all you guys as well. Good night.